President Biden, in his 2024 announcement video, drilling down on the key themes of his next campaign and framing the general election fight against Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans, who are obviously trying to regain the White House. Delaware Democratic Senator Chris Coons, co-chairman of the Biden 2024 campaign, joins me now. Senator, not only are you a good friend from Delaware, former colleague of Joe Biden's in the Senate, but I think you just got off the phone with the president, who's now running for re-election. No big secret to you. So any tips for us? What did he share?
Well, our president's excited to talk to the building trades, exactly the men and women who are looking at years of opportunity ahead because of the strong bipartisan infrastructure bill that President Biden helped pull us together here in Congress to get to his desk and get signed into law. We were just talking briefly about how excited I am to be a co-chair of the campaign to support him for re-election, and how excited the American middle class is, the folks who are at that Building Trades Conference, for the opportunities that are being made possible by the CHIPS and Science Act, which the president signed into law. It doesn't just compete with China, it helps rebuild American manufacturing. The Inflation Reduction Act, that doesn't just strengthen clean energy and energy independence here in the country, it reduces prescription drug prices. And all the other critical pieces of legislation that help strengthen background checks for guns, invest in community mental health, make our country stronger and safer from future pandemics. Our president has a great record to run on. And Andrea, I'm excited to get going. This morning's video announcement and the speech he's about to give to the building trades are the perfect launch for his re-election campaign.
Well, Senator, let me get down to some real nitty-gritty here, because before he can really start campaigning, he's facing this debt ceiling crisis. And right now, the Republicans in the House are planning to vote on the Speaker's tying that approval to some severe budget cuts. And they say they're going forward no matter what, even though they know it won't get through the Senate. So they're doing this test vote. It's a test of strength against the president. And just now, OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, has put out a statement that the president would veto it. This is a game of budget chicken between the two sides, with the full faith and credit of the United States, the future of the global economy at stake here. So doesn't the president have to at least start talking? There's a lot of pressure from some Democrats now that he should at least start talking to the Speaker of the House and trying to resolve this before they get into a showdown that goes off the cliff.
Well, Andrea, as you know better than anyone, going over the cliff, defaulting, would be disastrous. It would throw the United States into recession. It would throw hundreds of thousands of people out of work. It would raise the prices that we all pay, whether at the pump or on our mortgages or on our credit cards. Default is something we have to avoid.
So what's wrong with
Speaker McCarthy has struggled.
What's wrong with at least sitting down and talking?
I'll get to that point in 1 second. Okay. I'll answer your question, Andrea. Of course, President Biden can, should, and will negotiate about our future budget and appropriations, but not at the point of a gun where Speaker McCarthy says we will default if you don't embrace these deep, unacceptable cuts. I hope your watchers will look into the details of what's being proposed by Speaker McCarthy. 1 million senior citizens thrown off of Meals on Wheels. 30,000 state and local police officers defunded and thrown off the force. There are 100 other examples of the significance of these cuts. This isn't the way to negotiate towards a budget resolution. We should not default. But of course, President Biden can and will negotiate with Republicans on our appropriations packages going forward through regular order.
Let me be more specific, because I know the list, and the list is something that obviously Democrats, the White House, will never accept. No question about that. But that's a budget conversation. What about sitting down and talking to the Speaker of the House about why the president thinks it's so critical to do a clean debt ceiling bill? I mean, at least that's a conversation that's worth having.
I believe he's had that conversation, but our president is clear. We're not going to default. We're going to raise this debt ceiling, but we're going to pay our bills and keep the good faith and credit of the United States secure. To negotiate, as a condition of avoiding default, making deep cuts in some incredibly valuable domestic programs like federal funding for state and local police, or federal funding for Head Start, or federal funding for Meals on Wheels, I think is unacceptable. And I don't expect our president to negotiate at the threat of default deep social spending cuts or deep domestic cuts.
Let me move to the campaign. And how do you combat the fact that he can't change, which is that he's getting older every day? God bless him. You know, he is projecting that he's got the enthusiasm.
Aren't we all, Andrea? Aren't we all?
You know, as of course. And the point is that he's the oldest president of the United States. As he enters this, he'll be 82 when he gets sworn in if he wins, 86 when he finishes his second term. So how does he counteract that? And people's concerns about it, because with at least half the people who are saying 70% of the Americans don't want him to run for a second term, and they say that age is a big factor.
Andrea, you know our president often says, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. And you watched the State of the Union speech. I was in the chamber. Our president showed incredible agility on the fly when heckled aggressively, I would argue inappropriately, by some of the MAGA House Republican members. President Biden engaged with them artfully, I would say owned them on the issue of whether or not there would be cuts in Social Security, whether or not there would be cuts in Medicare. He enjoyed the exchange. He was vigorous and agile and engaged. And that's the President Biden who I know, publicly and privately. Just watch the address he's about to give to the building trades leadership of our nation. Just watch how he conducts himself in negotiations with members of Congress about the critical pieces of legislation he signed into law. I think at the end of the day, the American people will come out and vote for Joe Biden for re-election because they know what he's gotten done, because they know he has decades of experience on the world stage. Unlike the governor of Florida, who is meeting some world leaders for the first time, President Biden has known them for years. 50 years in public service has given him a deep reservoir of knowledge, of experience, and relationships. And that's why his leadership on responding to the brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine has been so successful, so agile, so capable, because of that experience. So, frankly, Andrea, I think as the American people begin to look at who the likely candidates are in the Republican Party and how far right they are moving on things like banning books and banning abortion nationally, and fighting more and more culture wars, and they look at the record of President Biden delivering strong bipartisan legislation that is addressing the real needs of the American people, I'm confident they'll re-elect Joe Biden.
Senator Chris Coons, the co-chair of the campaign, proving, of course, right away exactly why you were chosen to be co-chair of this campaign. You know him better than anyone else. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.